I'm tying the dark stone from Favorite Flies and Their Histories by Mary Orvis Marbury on a number 6 sproat hook with claret thread. The head on Mary's fly is that color, which is why I'm using that color thread. I'm using the illustration in Mary's book, published in 1892. I also have a photograph of the fly that she tied to be illustrated for that book. In addition to the illustration and the photo, I also have a list of ingredients in a book called Flies by J. Edson Leonard. So a gold tag, I have a bicolor tinsel. I maybe made that tag a little bit long. That's okay. I can cover it back up with body material. I have a bicolor tinsel that I tie in with the gold side to the hook, and then when I begin to wrap it, that flips and the gold shows. So I'll take that down to where the bend kind of starts. On a sproat hook, that's kind of a long sloping bend. I thought I'd given myself enough tinsel to do this. I did. Just have to reach in there to grab it. Bring my thread back down where I can tie that in. I'll wrap up over that tinsel, and then I'm actually going to just wrap all the way down the hook shank to keep my body even. I'm going to be dubbing the body, but I want to do a bit of a taper on it, and if I have too much tied in at the back here, it gets a little lump there, and so then it's a little bit harder to keep that taper fine at the tail end. For the tail, I am using 3 barbs from a turkey tail feather, and according to the ingredients, there are options. That is the ingredients in Leonard's book. There are some options. The tail can be either turkey or duck, brown duck barbs off of a brown duck feather. I find the turkey feather on this size hook works a little bit better because it's a little bit larger barbs. I want to split my tail barbs, so I'm just take a piece of thread and double it around the hook shank bend, and then get those 3 fibers to separate. These fibers have smaller fibers on them, so these are called barbs, and the smaller fibers on them are called barbules, and the barbules act like Velcro, and this isn't going to guarantee them staying separated, but it will help a little bit. I'll bring that thread up, and I'm just going to wrap over it lightly a couple times just to hold it in place. And then I can adjust the separation of those tail barbs by pulling on the thread very carefully. As if I pull too hard, then I bend them back, and I don't want that. And I think that's good. I'll go ahead and wrap that in tight. Keep those in place. I can clip out these thread ends. Leonard says that the rib on Mary's fly is yellow thread, and I am making just a tier's decision. I like the look of gold oval tinsel better than yellow thread, and I think it looks very much like Mary's fly. So I'm going to use gold oval tinsel for the rib. And then I am following the list of ingredients in Leonard's book for the body, which is seal for dubbing. I have some seal fur scraps. This is garment leftovers. You can see there's a stitching of the two pieces together and lines here where it's been cut out. So this one is black, and then I have this smaller piece. There are cut lines also on it, so this is scraps from garment industry. This one I had to pull all the guard hairs out when I pulled the fluff out, but I didn't want either of these two colors by themselves, so I've taken from both of them and blended them together to get the color that I want for this body. And then I will dub that onto the body, try to keep a very thin noodle as I start at the tail, and then I'll let it grow a little bit or do more winds, wraps on the body as I take it up the body and see if I can taper it just a little bit. It's not a strongly tapered fly, but this is an imitation of a stonefly, and insects generally have some kind of taper to their abdomen and into the thorax. Thorax is generally thicker than the tail end. So I'm not tying a thorax per se on this fly. It's all one piece, the abdomen and the thorax. But I do want to show that a little bit with a bit of a taper as I tie forward. So if I have a thinner noodle on my thread, then I'll just have to do a few more wraps and then just keep adding as I go up. And the fibers from the seal are very short, and so I have to add bits and pieces from my clump to get a longer noodle. And just be patient and take my time. There's no hurry. Just want to make sure that I'm leaving enough room at the front of the fly for hackle and wings. And I'm going to be happy with that. I'm going to counter wrap the rib. That way it will sit on top rather than fall between the wraps of the dubbing. I'll put 3 wraps over the top of my rib. That catches it in. And then I will put 3 wraps. I was taught 2 or 3 wraps underneath tight to secure it. Then I can clip out the extra. Those 2 tail barbs just want to marry, and I guess I'm just going to have to let them. For the hackle, I have this dark brown hen hackle. I have stripped off all the fuzz from the bottom of the feather. I'm going to take my hackle plier and grab probably about half of this feather. I'm just kind of gauging how much hackle I want on it, and what I pulled back away from the tip is probably going to be enough. And then I'm going to cut that whole end off and just leave a little triangle, and that's my tie-in triangle. And I'll wrap my thread around that little triangle, and that will hold that in. Then I can pull up on the rachis. The stem of a feather is called a rachis. And then I will pull back on the barbs. And I'm going to wrap this in wet fly fashion. It's very likely that the flies, when Mary tied them, were fished wet. Not so much because they wanted to, but because they just didn't have the ingredients we have now to keep things floating the same way. And also the dry fly craze had not really hit the eastern United States yet in 1892 when Mary published her book. So I will wrap 3 wraps over the rachis, and I'm going to pull back on it just to wrap under it, and then I'm going to wrap back also along the whole hackle here because I need to have some room for my wing tie-in and head. I don't know if I can snap that. I find it best if I can snap that rachis out rather than cut it off because it snaps close to the thread. And then if I try to split the hackle on the top, that'll give me a place to tie in my wing. So Leonard says that there are options also for the wing material, and I find that turkey tail works really well, and I will admit that part of it is that I find it just easier to tie in. So I have 2 turkey tail slips. I have put them back to back. They came off of these feathers, and so these are opposing feathers from the tail of a tom, and I've just cut those slips out of that, put them back to back with the raw side down, and then I will pinch those together, hold them directly on top of the fly, on top of the shank. I want the bend of the hook to kind of come out with the tips of the feathers, and then I will bring my thread up, pinch it, bring it down, and then back up and cinch, and then do a couple of cinch wraps, and then I can straighten it up and make sure that it's standing straight up and down on top of the hook, and then go ahead and wrap that in tight, making sure that I have plenty of room to clip out the butt ends and not crowd the eye. And then I will go ahead and grab the front of the hook with my thread and wrap up over the butt ends there where I've clipped them to create the head. The heads on Mary's flies were fairly large, and that's because she used eyeless hooks, and she tied in what was called gut. It was the innards of the silk moth caterpillar, and those caterpillars were dissected. That material was taken out, stretched, twisted together into a strand, and sometimes it was tied in right as the eye, and sometimes it was tied in as a leader with the eye at the end. In a modern twist, I am going to put a drop of diluted goop on the head, maybe another one. I've managed to keep the eye clean, but just to make sure that it's ready for a tippet, I will pass a hackle feather through it.